Okay, great. Thank you for those stories. A lot of people think that witchcraft is very rare. What would you say about that from your own experience?
Well, again, I would say to a degree that's true. There are a lot of witches, but most of those witches don't know what they're doing. They don't really have a lot of occult power. They're basically playing around. It's still dangerous because they've turned their back on the living, Elohim, the living God, and they're worshiping false gods. But even in my own life, as a witch, I had in 16 years of practicing the occult maybe a half dozen times in that life when I did something really astounding. There were a lot of times when we would do magic and nothing would happen. Quite a lot, in fact. But every now and then the devil would throw us a bone. And we remember years ago we had seen this movie, Little Big Man, with Dustin Hoffman. And there's this old Native American Indian chief in it. And he was supposed to go up on top of a mountain and die and do magic so he would die. And nothing happened. And he walked down the mountain and said, sometimes the magic works and sometimes it doesn't. And so that became kind of our tagline. Oh, well, sometimes the magic works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's not like there are all these witches running around doing all these wonderful, miraculous things. It's a comparative rarity. But there are literally tens of thousands of witches in America, probably hundreds of thousands by now. It was very rare when we got into it back in the late 60s. But now, you can go to any occult bookstore or even any regular bookstore and find 25, 30 books on how to be a witch.
Wow, thank you. Would you please share us the story about the man who got attacked by a demon in his garage when he tried to call him up?
Well, this is ceremonial magic now, which is like high art, high church, high theater. But the idea is you lay down this special circle on the floor with chalk and sulfur and various other things, depending on what ritual you're doing. And then you stay in the circle as the magician, and you outside the circle, you set up this what's called a triangle of manifestation on the floor, and you call up some powerful demon spirit to come and serve you. And supposedly, as long as you're in this circle, he can't hurt you. That's the rules. And so this guy was calling up the demon, the demon that Aleister Crowley called the mighty demon, Haranzan. This is one of the mightiest and most feared of all demons on earth. And he was calling this demon up, and it took like hours and hours. These incantations and vile-smelling incense was filling this garage, and he basically turned into a ceremonial temple. And, all of a sudden the demon started to manifest. And you could see this just awful-looking thing that is indescribable. And he started to command it, because the idea is you command this demon that he will have to obey you from then on, kind of like a genie.
How would did the demon just appear like as a ghost in the room? Or
no,
what?
It was like this big sort of slimy tentacle, amorphous, really not easy to describe, very, very pustulant and tentacles and slithery and, not at all anthropomorphic, And he was exerting his force on this demon, and the thing was reaching a crescendo. The magic circle was actually glowing. It was so powerful. And I know this is true because I'm the one who was sitting there keeping track of all this as a scribe, because every ceremonial magician has a little lowly peon flunky to write everything down.
Wow.
Kind of like a scribe.
So this demon, how big was it?
It towered to the very roof of the garage.
Huh?
And all of it, and it's because I was sitting in what they call a neutral triangle, so the demon didn't mess with me.
And was it solid, or could you sort of see through it?
It was sort of amorphous. But see, the ideal is that the more incense you burn and the more blood you shed, the demon draws substance from this. This is what's called the material basis in ceremonial magic. So the more incense the guy burned, the more easily you could see the demon. Well, finally, just when this thing is reaching a crescendo, all of a sudden the phone rang. And the guy reached out of the circle to answer the phone, and instantly the circle vanished, and he vanished, just in a flash of sulfur. And the funny thing was, there was no phone in the room.
Ooh.
That's how tricky these demons can be. And I went in and I told the guy's wife, widow, and she was also into this. She was a witch and a sorceress. And she was just sort of philosophical about it, it happens. Obviously, she was very upset, but you can't call the police and say a demon kidnapped my husband and carried him into the abyss. They don't really have jurisdiction there. So that illustrates it. Even though people think this is either, fun stuff like Harry Potter, or it's like, just even not even real, it can be very real. Now, I'm not saying that happens every week, that kind of thing. It probably doesn't. But this guy was a very high-level ceremonial magician, and yet he was still able to be tricked by the demon.
Wow. Now, what's the definition of a ceremonial magician?
Well, that's like ceremonial magic is the highest form of magic. And it's where you have to learn long, elaborate, some rituals, like we did one ritual called the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, that took 6 months of preparation.
Wow.
And every day you have to go through purifications, and many of your viewers probably have heard the magic word abracadabra.
Yeah, sure.
Well, that came from that. That's a word on a magic square from the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. And that usually they involve robes and incense, and you have to wear certain colored robes and certain colored candles, and you have to have wands and swords and all kinds of stuff. It's not something that the person who didn't have a lot of money would want to do. And usually it involves either invocation or evocation. Invocation is where you believe you're calling on something higher than yourself, like an angelic being. These people believe that they can call upon angels and command them, which of course is, horsepucky. But that's what they believe. Now, an evocation is where they call on something that's lower than a human being, like a demon, an elemental, an elementary, or something like that, and command them to serve them. And like that particular book that I was talking about, it would have all these talismans that were you draw on parchment that would be like magic squares, except they'd have letters in them, and like a talisman to find treasure, or a talisman to have a woman fall in love with you, or a talisman to be able to fly through the air. And you would get conversation and knowledge with your HGA, your holy guardian angel. That was the ultimate goal of this. And the holy guardian angel would touch these different talismans and empower them, so then you could find treasure or fly or whatever it happened to be. So we went through all of this stuff, just months of it. And we did the ritual, and then of course we had all these talismans, and none of them worked.
Okay, does that mean there's something wrong with guardian angels?
No, there's nothing wrong with guardian angels. This is just a construct that they come, because you've got to realize, these people that came up with this stuff in the Middle Ages, that's where most ceremonial magic originated, was between like the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s. They lived in fear of their lives, because if they were found, the Catholic Church, which was really the only church in those days, would burn them at the stake. And so they made their stuff sound very Christian. They used like if you were to read some of these things, you would think you were reading, like there might be psalms, there might be long passages where the person is addressed either in the name of God, like Yahweh or El Elyon or Adonai or something, or whatever. And so they were made to appear to be very holy and very sanctimonious. And they were often written in Latin, which was, of course, the sacred language. So the problem is that they did that to mask the fact that they were actually trafficking with dark forces.
Well, sometimes we have, like, politicians will say a prayer to God, so that means they could be praying to someone else. How would you tell the difference?
Well, I mean, only Yahweh God knows a man's heart or a woman's heart. So if he is saying a prayer, we don't know if he's really praying to the true God or not. Because really, this is like surprise somebody reads, but the name of God is not God. That's not his name. That's actually the name of an ancient Sumerian little g god of fortune or good luck. The name of the true and living deity is Yahweh. And his son, of course, is Jesus Yeshua. So if you pray in those names, you may or may not be a genuine believer. Only the Almighty knows that. We're told not to judge people's hearts, but only to judge their fruits. And if there's someone who says, "Well, I'm a Christian politician," all this stuff, and then he's going out there and doing all this reprehensible stuff, then he's probably, you got to kind of be a fruit inspector.
I see. Okay. Can you tell us some more stories that show witchcraft has some power?
One example, there's a law within the witches. The witches have their own kind of Bible. It's called the Book of Shadows. And basically, one of the rules in it is the law of threefold return. If you do something good to someone, you're supposed to get it back 3 times better. If you do something nasty to another person, you get it back 3 times worse.